Hello and welcome to a bit of an overdue episode of the One Report. For a start, you are getting this on a Tuesday instead of the regular Monday, so I apologize about that. But also, we missed a week last week. I think in literally the last episode of this, I said, wow, we haven't missed a week. And then I had about half of the week booked off as holiday. I wasn't going to be working the second half of last week. I thought I would still have time to put out an episode of the One Report on the Monday, but I had so much work to do before I went away that things just got delayed and we didn't have time to do it. And because of that, I've been a little bit out of the loop with a lot of the One news that has been going on. Had a lot to catch back up on yesterday as my first day back in a few days. And so that is why we are doing it today. And we're also not going to be kind of running through the regular news and things like that. Again, like I said, I've been a bit out of the loop on that kind of stuff anyway. And with a big event coming up this Friday, I thought we would just talk about this card. And yeah, we'll do that instead, because I would have been putting out a preview of this card anyway. I thought we would just do it here on the One Report rather than saving this until later on in the week. My voice doesn't sound amazing, so apologies about that. It's cold here in the UK, so illness is all over the place, and I'm sure that will continue. And we will keep the One Report coming, so don't worry about that. The series isn't going anywhere. I always appreciate the support and things like that. Channel hasn't been super active as of late. I've just been super busy the last few weeks. I think it'll probably slow down. Obviously, we have the last One Fight Night card of the year coming up this Friday, One Fight Night 26 at Lumpinee Stadium. We also have the last UFC pay-per-view card of the year with UFC 310 on Saturday night in Las Vegas. We've already had the PFL World Championships. So a lot of the big MMA action is already wrapped up or is wrapping up this weekend, it seems. I mean, we do have another UFC card the weekend after, and we still have some Friday fights to get into. So we'll have enough to talk about on these One Report episodes at the very least. But yeah, hopefully we'll have some more time that I can dedicate to this channel, get some videos up, things like that. Maybe we'll do some kind of end of year awards for One Championship. That could be fun. So maybe we'll do that. But let's get to this card, which in my opinion is the best One Fight Night card that they have put together in quite some time. I would probably say, when we first started getting the One Fight Night cards, when One first moved to Amazon, they were stacked events. They were really strong. Some of the biggest and best fights that One have ever put on. DJ versus Marais 2 was obviously very early. Angela Lee versus Zhong Xing Nan. You had, just off the top of my head, Andrade versus Lineker, the first one and the second one. You had Christian Lee versus Abasov. More on Christian Lee later, of course. You had Malakin versus Derrida. You had some huge events. You had Alazov versus Superbon. Huge events that we had just in a row. There is a video actually up on this channel of ranking the One Fight Night events. I don't remember what number we went up to by the time I put out that video, but I think there was probably like a good 20 that we ranked, if not a little bit less. And those early cards were absolutely phenomenal. But then, we started to get the numbered cards back. Your 1165s, 1166, those kind of events, and they kind of became the new major events whilst we started to get these at Lumpinee instead. But this one is super strong. Yeah, top to bottom, I think this is one of the strongest Fight Night cards we have ever had, and one of the best cards of the year from One Championship, which is super exciting because we just had 1169, and that was a very big card as well. There are a lot of familiar faces on this card, guys that we are used to seeing, but I think there's also, there's a fair few guys on here that we haven't seen in some time. And some new faces as well to One Championship. So exciting stuff, I think, across the board on this card. I'm very excited to watch it. I will be covering the UFC live this Saturday. When I say live, I don't mean I'm going to be in Las Vegas. I will be covering it from this very room. But that makes it difficult to stay up Friday night for One Championship that probably ends about 3:30 in the morning here in the UK, maybe 4 a.m. And then the UFC tends to end at about 6 a.m. And so staying up for both is absolutely brutal, and it leaves me devastated on the Sunday, and then Monday I have to get up and do all my usual work. So I don't know whether I'm going to watch this one live. I'm undecided right now. I might, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys can relate to this. The waking up in the morning and having some kind of drink. I mean, today we are back on the iced coffee today, which is probably a bad idea because it's very cold right now. But um, I'll have a cup of tea and watch these fights Saturday morning. Is probably more likely, but either way, however you watch them, I think you're going to have a good time. Um, let's get into it. Let's go fight by fight. I don't know whether we should just leave this. We'll leave this graphic up for a little bit, and then we'll switch over to the one website a little bit later on. Kicking off the card is a fight that I am very, very excited to watch. You have Tong Poon taking on Daniel Williams in strawweight Muay Thai. Daniel Williams, of course, back in Muay Thai. He does tend to flip-flop between Muay Thai, MMA, a little bit of kickboxing in there as well. He speaks a lot about wanting to focus on one, and I think that he only recently fought in MMA as well, that win over Bama Doji. But I think Muay Thai is probably the best skill set for him, purely because you saw in some of his MMA fights, the one against Lito Adiwang from earlier this year comes to mind, where Williams' striking looked very good, but it's a different game, and Adiwang was able to get takedowns and land some big shots as well because Daniel Williams was trying to defend the takedowns. So I just think Muay Thai is probably the best fit for him, but we will find out because Tong Poon is, has his critics, but he is a incredibly fun fighter to watch. I'm always happy to see him on these fight night cards. It does not surprise me when he gets booked on all of these big cards because he's a personality, he's a character, his fighting style is very exciting. And he's a perfect card opener, I think, because if you tune in to watch a one championship card, if like I said, if you're like me and you're in the UK and this is on Sky Sports and you just happen to be channel hopping at 1 a.m. in the morning or whatever time this card is going to start, it usually is 1 a.m., I believe, and you see this guy walk out, you're probably going to stick around and see what he's all about. His fights are always fun, and then you're probably going to stick around and watch a couple more fights, which maybe is a talking point here with a couple of submission grappling contests quite early on. That might make it a little bit harder for maybe more casual fight fans or even just sport fans to stick with it. But either way, I think this will be a really fun opener. Interesting clash of styles. You would imagine, I think that Daniel Williams will try and fight this one a bit more strategically rather than brawling with Tong Poon. I don't think that'll end too good for him just because Tong Poon has got some serious power in his hands and Daniel Williams does get hit. But I think if he fights smart, he might be able to pull out the win here. Bout number 2, we have Dante Leon taking on, of course, the husband of Angela Lee, Bruno Pucci. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, so I apologize. I don't know if it's Pucci. I don't really know much about this one. Obviously, we've seen Bruno compete in one a few times. It makes sense for him to be competing in submission grappling, I think. And I don't know a ton about Dante Leon, but we're going to find out about him together. He is, of course, one of the newer names that one has brought in. One of them is also coming up on this card with Cole Abate. One of the names that they've brought in to kind of rejuvenate the grappling divisions. Obviously, in recent times, we have had Mikey Musumeci depart submission grappling in one to sign with the UFC, not as a mixed martial artist, but as a submission grappler. He's going to be making his debut. Actually, I might make a video about that. We did already make a video on this channel about his debut being confirmed for the UFC Fight Pass Invitational. I might make a video about how he performs and just the whole experience of watching Mikey compete in a UFC under the UFC banner, shall we say. So yeah, I don't know too much about this one. I would expect Dante Leon to get the win. Again, I don't have a whole lot of basis for that just because he is one of the newer guys that one has brought in. I would imagine he has got some pretty good credentials. I would imagine he's quite an exciting grappler, and Bruno is a good grappler, but I wouldn't say he is necessarily at the top level. I could be proven wrong. Like I said, I'm going into this matchup kind of blind, so we'll see how that one plays out. Bout number 3, you've got a strawweight kickboxing matchup between Jonathan DeBella and Rui Botelho. Let's switch over now. You guys have worked out the run-in order by this point, so we can switch over to the One Championship website over here. Things are about to get very bright because the One Championship website needs a dark mode, right? We need to sort that out. Anyway, DeBella versus Botelho, strawweight kickboxing. think this is a fight that DeBella has spoken about for quite some time. Um, it looked like when he was champion, he was potentially going to fight Botelho. He, of course, didn't. He ended up fighting Prajanchai, but Botelho has got back-to-back wins, a split decision win over Zhang Peimian that was very controversial. I thought that one would have got a rematch, honestly, to decide the next challenger for DeBella. Like I said, he ended up going on to fight Prajanchai instead, and he got a decision win over Tong Poon last time out in October. Um, yeah, I think this fight makes a lot of sense if you're not going to give DeBella the rematch against Prajanchai, which I think he should have got, but he didn't. If you're going to have him fight somebody before he potentially gets another shot at Prajanchai, Botelho, I think, is the opponent that makes the most sense. I wouldn't have been surprised to have seen DeBella matched up with Sam A either, considering the run that he has been on, but maybe the turnaround wouldn't have quite suited Sam A because he did fight at that 1169 card where he put on a phenomenal performance against Zhang Peimian. And it's probably the number one contender right now. Like I said, if you're not going to give DeBella the rematch, I think DeBella is probably the number one contender, but he didn't get the rematch. He has to go and fight Botelho first. I would expect him to come through here, but you never know. And there's a lot riding on this fight for both men. I'm a huge fan of watching Jonathan DeBella, one of my favorite strikers, to watch compete in one. Very excited to have him back, and I don't want to, lean too far in these fights, right? I'm here to just watch these guys compete, and if Battaglia wins, what a story that is. He goes on a 3-fight win streak and secures himself a title shot. But and doesn't have the best overall record in one either. It's really as of late that he's put it together. But at the same time, I feel like DeBella is owed that Prajanchai rematch, and so if he then has to fight for it, and loses, it's a tough pill to swallow for JDB. So we'll see how that one plays out. But I am a big fan of Mr. Jonathan DeBella. I should probably move myself over here so I'm not blocking some of these faces. Lightweight submission grappling contest, previously mentioned, Cole Abate will be making his one debut here against Shinya Aoki, who I know, kind of said some things about this matchup, which maybe doesn't paint the best image. Kind of made it seem like he didn't want this matchup and didn't understand why it had been put together. I think it's pretty obvious why it has been put together. Cole Abate is coming into one as, I believe he's is he 20? I believe he's 20 years old. I'm just going to pull that up. Yeah, 20 years old. It's not on the same level as when one signed the Ruotolos and Musamechi, those kind of guys, but is definitely a guy that could turn into one of those talents. What I don't know enough about submission grappling to say what his ceiling is, but he definitely seems like a guy that one think might be the future of one of these weight classes, and what a way to introduce him. Have him go up against a legend of the game, like Shinya Aoki. People are going to tune in to watch Shinya, and a win over Shinya Aoki on your resume is a very good way to start out life in one championship. That's not to say that I think Cole Abate is going to run through Shinya Aoki. I would expect him to come away with the win. Shinya is a tough veteran, so I could see this one not being the most exciting if Shinya is just able to kind of shut up shop. He, of course, has already faced the likes of, did he face Cade or Ty? I think it was Cade that he had a match with, and he had a match with Mikey as well. So it will be a good measuring stick for Cole Abate, I think. And a little bit like the Dante Leon matchup lower down here on the card. We're going to learn a lot about him in this matchup. And so for that reason, I like it, even if Shinya maybe does not. Up next, featherweight MMA contest, Shamil Gazanov taking on Halil Amir. Halil Amir is one of the guys on one's MMA roster that I am super high on. His only loss in one was his last fight against Akbar Abdullayev. If you guys have watched this channel a few times, you know that Akbar Abdullayev is a guy that I think is world class. Or maybe world class potential. Definitely has the ability, I think, to become world class. Halil Amir is a guy that I think is right at the top tier of MMA in one. Would I expect him to come through this matchup against Shamil Gazanov? I probably would. Shamil does have a loss on his record in one, a submission loss to Gary Tonin. Halil Amir obviously doesn't bring the same level of submission threat that a Gary Tonin does. Not many people on the planet do. But I do think Halil has got a better, well-rounded skill set, or I should say a better rounded skill set. Gazanov is a good wrestler, but I haven't seen anything from Halil Amir that makes me think that he's going to get repeatedly taken down. And I think that whilst this fight stays standing, he has a fairly big advantage. And I just think, yeah, his skill set, I think, is a little bit better than Gastanov's. But, we'll see. But that is where I'm kind of thinking this fight goes. But I think that this is a really good matchup as well. Like, that's not me saying that, I don't want to see this fight or something. Shamil still has a very, very good chance of winning this fight. My hair's starting to get super long already. I don't know. Maybe we'll get it cut before Christmas. I don't know. But when it starts to struggle to fit in a hat, that's when I start to think about cutting it. Sidetracked there. Next fight, we have a flyweight Muay Thai contest between Nakrob Fairtex and Contorny. This fight is absolutely fantastic. I love this fight. Contorny looked amazing last time out against Tigir Kalalov at 1169. Nakrob has come off a pretty good win streak himself. Obviously stopped Tigir in the first round. His only loss in one is to Nabil Anan, who we'll talk about later on. But Nabil is probably the most talked about rising star in one right now in terms of Muay Thai. Obviously, he's going to be fighting in kickboxing, but like I said, we'll get to that. So no shame in losing to Nabil, who has been on an absolute tear as of late. I think that these two guys are two of the top contenders in this division, if not the two top contenders in this division. If Rodtang ends up moving on and leaving the flyweight division after he, of course, was stripped of his title at 1169 for failing to make weight and pass his hydration test for his rematch with Jacob Smith, I think these two guys, this could easily be a vacant flyweight Muay Thai title fight. In fact, if one of these guys wins, I'll be very interested to see who they pair him up with, because this seems like the fight to make. But yeah, both guys are on an absolute tear. This should be really, really interesting. I said this in my 1169 video and the kind of aftermath of that Contorny is becoming one of my favorite guys to watch in one. Nakrob, super talented as well, so yeah, this should be an absolute banger. I mean, if this was the main event or the co-main event, I'd be stoked for this card. That's how good this fight is. And I didn't see it coming either. This was quite a late addition to the card, so shout out to that, I guess. Flyweight MMA contest here. I'd have to look at the whole card graphic, but I would say maybe apart from the submission grappling contests, because I just don't know much about some of the competitors in those. This is probably the one I'm least looking forward to on this card. And when I say least looking forward to, that isn't to say that I'm like, oh yeah, we have this fight to get through. I'm just not like stoked for this fight. If this was a regular fight night card, I'd say this is pretty standard affair for one. I think it's just the strength of this card is so good that this matchup kind of stands out a little bit, especially with the fights that it's in and around, right? We just talk about Nakrob and Contorny, and now we're talking about Gilbert Nakatani making his one debut against Yuya Wakamatsu. We might get something interesting out of this. Obviously, if Nakatani is able to go out there and secure a win over Wakamatsu on his debut, that's huge and really does shake up the division. I don't know much about him. I know that I think his record is 8-1. I could be wrong. That's just off the top of my head, but I would expect Wakamatsu to come through here. But Nakatani could shake up the division. He really could. So that one, I think, is more of a. We'll talk about that in the aftermath, whether there's an interesting talking point, but I feel like the talking point is going to be Yuya Wakamatsu gets a win. Dennis Puric versus Elias Mahmoudi, another absolutely fantastic fight. Both guys are so exciting to watch. That last performance from Elias, was it Taiki Naito that he beat last time out? Yeah, where he stopped him in the third round with that spin. Also, as we found out afterwards, whilst battling some crazy adversity in the lead up to that fight, to put on that good of a performance, super impressive. Dennis Puric, absolute value for money every single time that he steps in there. Super fun style, bit of a brawler at times. Definitely brawled with Rodtang, which was a bold decision from Dennis, and we love him for it, the Bosnian Menace. So I think this one should be super fun as well. This is another fight that, if this was the co-main event, I'd be super happy with this card. Then you have Reese McLaren versus Jared Brooks, a fight that we have spoken about on this channel already. A fight that I did not see coming at all. I thought that the likelihood was that Jared would be defending his interim title whilst he waits for Joshua Pasio to return from his injury so that they can do the strawweight unification bout. Instead, you have Jared, who is the interim strawweight champion, moving up to the flyweight division where he will take on Reece McLaren, who is one of the top contenders in this division, has been for a long time. I think it looked like when Adriano Moraes defeated Danny Kingad at 1169 that he would probably get matched up with Reece McLaren in a vacant title fight. Obviously, the flyweight belt is vacant after Demetrius Johnson retired at 1168. But no, we have Reece McLaren taking on Jared Brooks, and you could say that this is almost like an unofficial semi-final. If you had Adriano and Danny Kingad on one side of the flyweight title bracket, this, I think, is probably the other side of that bracket, because if Jared beats Reece McLaren, considering the fact he is the interim strawweight champion, his only loss in one was that DQ against Joshua Pasio, I think that he would deserve a flyweight title shot after beating Reece McLaren. And maybe that says more about the current flyweight landscape, but I don't know if it necessarily does. I just think that Jared has been so dominant at strawweight. If he comes up and beats Reece McLaren, I think it makes a lot of sense. And you have a champion from the weight class below taking on Adriano Moraes, who is probably, I would say, the best in the flyweight division right now. And of course, a multiple-time former champion, a big name for one. You know that Jared is going to do a lot in selling that fight as well. I think that would be a really, really big fight for one. So I think that would happen next. And I think that if Reece McLaren is able to beat Jared Brooks, again, we haven't seen anyone properly beat Jared yet in one. So if Reece McLaren is the guy that is able to do that, then I think that really helps to sell the fight with Adriano, because it could be Reece's best win in one, honestly. That's how good Jared Brooks is. Interesting to see how his grappling looks at flyweight now that he, is going to be undersized compared to a lot of these guys, but he isn't necessarily, even for a strawweight, he's not the biggest. I mean, he looked big next to Gustavo Balart, but yeah, good fight, very good fight. Excited to see it. Excited to see how Jared looks at flyweight, and I think that if he comes through here and ends up getting this fight with Adriano for the vacant title, that'll be huge. Is Reece versus Adriano as big? I would say probably not, but like I said, if he's able to go out there and beat Jared Brooks, become the first man to really beat Jared Brooks in one, that sets up a fight with Adriano very well. And I think a lot of people will be more interested in that fight. Like I said, I thought that it would just be Adriano versus Reece for the vacant title. Would I be more interested in seeing that fight if Reece is able to go and beat Jared Brooks? 100%. 100% I would. And so that is why I quite like the way that this has actually ended up playing out. Although I do think Mansour Malachiev probably does deserve a shot at Jared if Joshua Pasio isn't going to be back. Next up, we have the third submission grappling contest on this card. Have one ever had 3 submission grappling matches on one card? I don't think so. Interesting that this is not the co-main event. We have spoken about this already on an episode of The One Report. I actually agree that this is a smart decision. I think that having the submission grappling straight into a title fight, like 2 title fights back to back, I don't think is particularly good for the pacing of these cards, especially when you have an MMA contest in the main event. If you have a striking world title fight in the main event, you know that is going to be fast-paced, high action. And that's not to say that you don't get that in MMA. You definitely do. But there is more chance of it being a slow and somewhat dull fight. And so I like the submission grappling, striking bout MMA. I like that layup. The way that they have, what's the word? Booked this card in terms of the running order. I think that this works actually quite well. We have Mesa Bastos defending the atomweight submission grappling title in a rematch with Danielle Kelly. They first met at 1 Fight Night 24 in August, where Bastos got the win in a pretty closely contested matchup, honestly. I thought Danielle Kelly did a pretty good job in that one. Wasn't able to threaten too much, but definitely was able to cause Bastos some problems that I don't think she was expecting. Bastos is incredibly well accomplished, so I wasn't surprised to see her get the win. She tends to, win the big one wherever she goes. She is one of the best in the world in this weight class. And whilst I think that Danielle Kelly is very good, I just I'm not sure about, you know, against Jessica Khan, where she won the title. Jessica Khan, another very accomplished competitor, and Mesa Bastos' teammate as well. She was able to play to her strengths and get the win that way. Being aggressive, using her wrestling a lot. I just don't know. I feel like that when you reach a certain level, that kind of caps, and I think that Mesa Bastos might just be um so good that the wrestling and the aggression and things, she has answers to them. And whilst, like I said, I thought Danielle Kelly did a good job in the first one, Bastos was still able to get the win, even if it wasn't, a fairly decisive win or anything like that. I think we might get the same thing again. I think Bastos will probably come through it, but we will find out, and I'm fairly interested to see how this one plays out. But as I mentioned in pretty much every one of these episodes, I appreciate that I'm probably more into the submission grappling than the majority of people who will be tuning into this card. But fear not if you are one of those people, because if you really want to, you can go get yourself a drink, some refreshments, all of that kind of stuff when this matchup is on. Because following that, we have a bantamweight kickboxing fight in the co-main event. You've got the former champion Pettenong taking on Nabil Anan, who will be making his kickboxing debut. I did not see this fight coming ever. Honestly, I thought that Nabil would probably fight another top contender in the bantamweight Muay Thai division and then potentially set himself up to face the winner of Superlek versus Nico Carrillo, which we have got coming up at 170 in January. Instead, Nabil is going to keep himself busy by going over to kickboxing, where he seems pretty confident that the experience he has accumulated in Muay Thai is going to help him here. He, of course, has put together a phenomenal win streak since losing his one debut to Superlek. Absolutely no shame in that, obviously, whatsoever. He's got 3 wins already this year, stopping Kulab Dam and then beating Felipe Lobo and Solin over last time out. Commiserations. I wish the best to Solanu, by the way. I said we weren't going to cover news. But I am gutted for him that he is out of the Sexham fight. But good to hear that he is doing okay after what looked like a absolutely horrible car crash. So glad to see that he is doing well, and that we've had some positive updates on him. Yeah, Nabil on a great run. Pettenong obviously was gone for 2 years. He beat Hiroki Yakamoto for the bantamweight kickboxing title at 1163 in November of 2022, and then was suspended, and so didn't come back for a while. He did come back earlier this year, one Friday Fight 68. That was the tentpole card headlined by Prajanchai versus DeBella, where he stopped Alaverdi Ramazanov in the second round and looked very, very good, I thought. And so I have no idea how this one goes because we haven't seen Nabil in kickboxing. Can I see him doing what he did to Felipe Lobo and just keeping Pettenong at arm's length and just basically not really giving him an opportunity to get into the fight? I could see that working. Will it be a total shutout like the Felipe Lobo fight was at points? No, I don't think so. I just think Pettenong is too good. I think that he will probably find a way to get through, but I do think Nabil could probably win 2 of 3 rounds by doing that. And so it's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens in this one. I think that we could probably see a scenario where Pettenong is chasing the fight and potentially needs a finish in order to get the win. But we will find out in the co-main event. And last but not least, I'll have a drink of my coffee. Because I've been doing too much chatting. But this card is so good that we had to run through every single fight. Main event, Christian Lee, one of my favorite fighters in one. He is back after 2 years away, after a really tough time for his family. Of course, he beat Cameron Abasov at one on Prime Video 4, I believe it was, in 2022 to become a 2-weight world champion, beat Abasov for the welterweight belt in one of the best fights I've ever seen in one. Best comeback in one. Unbelievable performance from Christian that night. And shortly after, his younger sister, Victoria Lee, tragically passes away. And obviously that has had a huge impact on the whole Lee family. Angela Lee, retired last year at One Fight Night 14, vacated the atomweight belt that was won by Stamp Fairtex that night. Adrian Lee, Christian's younger brother, has since made his one debut and earned back-to-back wins on his pro record, both coming by submission. With Christian in his corner, him and Adrian have been working a lot over the last couple of years. I actually spoke to Christian Lee in an interview before he was supposed to fight at 1169. This fight obviously got pushed back a month. I did do an interview with him. There is a written piece out there for fighters only. You can go and check that out. It was in the November issue. So you can get a subscription and you can read that back if you would like to. In that piece, I spoke to him about his relationship with Adrian. Obviously, he's incredibly proud of what Adrian has gone on to accomplish, but also spoke about how Adrian has benefited him. Giving him, Adrian is also a lightweight, so he has a training partner that he can work with at all times, that he has a great relationship and bond with. And it just seems like they've really helped each other to grow as martial artists in this time. So I do think Christian is going to be better than he was before. He broke through at such a young age that he really didn't have a whole lot of time to develop. When you look back at his one career, he really didn't have that many wins before he was fighting, pretty high level guys in one. And that takes a toll. You can't, it's very, very hard to keep evolving and learning new skills when you're constantly preparing for the next fight. And he was also incredibly active in this period. In the first few years of his career, he was fighting like 4 times a year at points. And so he thinks that the time off has been a bit of a blessing in disguise for him. And we will find out when he takes on Alibek Razulov in a defense of his lightweight title. Razulov made his one debut earlier this year. He is undefeated. He came into one, fought Okrayun for the interim title. He beat Okrayun, but did not win the interim title because I believe he failed his hydration test. That fight, there wasn't tons to say about it. It was a pretty smothering performance from Alibek Razulov, I would say is probably the best thing you could say about it. He won the fight by not letting Okrayun do anything too effective. That's his style. And I think that style is not particularly great for one championship's scoring system. If you don't know already, one championship's MMA bouts are scored as a whole rather than round by round. And so you are looking for the person who was able to do the most damage, land the most effective strikes across 3 or 5 rounds rather than winning rounds per se, if that makes sense. I haven't done a very good job of explaining that. But what I mean by that is Alibek Razulov was pretty dominant against Okrayun. But if in the 5th round, Okrayun goes out and lands, a big shot and drops him or cuts Razulov, he probably wins that fight, even though he lost the 4 rounds before it. Because he landed, he had the most effective moment of the 5 rounds. And I just think that is going to be a problem for Alibek Razulov against an opponent like Christian Lee. I do think Razulov is going to have success with his grappling. I do think there are going to be moments in this fight where Christian Lee is frustrated that he isn't able to get Razulov off of him. But I just think that Christian Lee is going to be too effective at capitalizing on the moments he does get. When they do break apart, landing striking, effective striking, I should say. Submission attempts even is something that I think Christian Lee will be able to get in this fight. Reversing the positions and landing shots off of the break. I just think that Razulov's style makes it really difficult for him to win this fight against Christian Lee. He really cannot allow Christian Lee to land anything too significant. And whilst that is maybe slightly unfair on Razulov, because he didn't do too much in the fight against Okrayun doesn't mean that he won't be able to land a takedown on Christian Lee and then do something with it. The Okrayun fight, we just got a lot of clinching and not really anything happening. I don't know whether Razulov always fights like that. I kind of assumed that he did because it seemed like that was his whole approach in that fight, was just to stifle Okrayun. And whilst I think that he might have opportunities to do the same to Christian Lee, I just think that Christian Lee is going to be able to produce those, impactful and effective moments that Okrayun was not able to when he did have the opportunities to do that. And I think that that is what will win Christian Lee this fight. I think that he will probably win a decision to defend this title. But I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to get a finish either. I'm just happy to have Christian Lee back. What a story this is. It's going to be an emotional moment watching him walk out again, all of that kind of stuff. So I think that this is a great way to close out the last Fight Night event of the year for One Championship. And that will also close out this episode of the One Report. Apologies again for it taking so long for us to get back to you for another one of these episodes. Like I said at the start, I appreciate the support massively. I will try and keep this channel a little bit more active in the coming weeks if I can. But until then, I will see you next week. Enjoy the fights. Enjoy One Fight Night 26, however you end up watching it in the world. Like I said, I will probably be watching it with a cup of tea on Saturday morning. And then on the following Monday, on the 13th episode of the One Report, we will recap all of the highlights, talking points, moments, everything that happened at One Fight Night 26 at Lumpinee Stadium, December 6th. Thank you for checking out this video. As always, like I said, enjoy the fights, and I will catch you in the near future. Peace.